Welcome back to The Femist for the Love of Humanity. I can't believe it. This is the 10th episode of season 2. And I actually look at people who have podcasts and they're like on their 200 and something episode. And although that's very appealing, I'd like to be there. I'm producing at a pace that feels good because I sit with a lot of this information for a while before I share it. Like I feel it work its way through me before I share it. I don't want to just present information that's been researched and then recounted. I think there's a time and a place for that. But what feels good for me is I want to have a personal experience with the information. And to be honest, a lot of the times my research is triggered because of a personal experience I'm having and I've made sense of on my own. And then there's interesting synchronicities in my environment that present a book to read or a trail of research to follow. And there have been times in my life where I've instigated the educational process. And I also, when I reflect back on it, I'm like, yeah, but there were hits of intuition there as well. So this episode, I want to talk about the inner world, um, intuition, that sort of thing. So, last few episodes talking about transformation, transmutation, and alchemy. And again, I want to reiterate alchemy is always happening. It's always happening. It's a awareness that you come to realizing, right? Like when you're little, you're eating food and you're having it processed and you're releasing what's been processed and your body's using what's been processed. But you're not necessarily aware of the metabolic process that's happening as you grow up and you receive education on it, or something draws your attention towards it, or you learn it in school, or you have a conversation with your parents about it, or however you come to understanding metabolism. When you're opened up to that level of awareness, you see the world a little bit differently. It's like looking behind the curtain a little bit. You get to understand the inner workings of things a little bit more. And I believe that life is very holographic, or it's very um, not fractalized. What's the word that I'm looking for? In the sense that it's mirrored throughout itself. Like we see similar processes mirrored on micro and macro levels, and we see similar processes happening within seemingly different areas of life. And so what I want to say is alchemy is always happening. And alchemy, this is like the great work, right? This is the work of a lifetime, and it can be the work of a moment to moment daily thing. This is like your magnum opus, your life's work, the becoming, you becoming you over and across an entire lifetime. And again, the daily metabolizing of your experience and how that relates to the inner world, because this happens on the inner world. Yes, we see the result on the outer world, but by the time we're seeing things happening on the outer plane, they've already been unfolding on the inner plane for quite some time. So this is my whole connection to energy first. This is something I talk about on my page. This is something that I've talked about on lives. Energy first. It's happening on the energetic realm first. And by the time you experience the external, it's kind of like old news almost. Like it's a reflection for you, but seeds have been planted and harvested by the time you're seeing the external reflect what's going on, like hair. Like your hair, like the ends of your hair are from a long time ago. The stuff that's just coming out of the top of your head, that's new growth. Like, so, okay, it's happening all the time. With regards to transformation and alchemy, I see this as it's an energetic metabolism. It's an energetic metabolism for me is how quickly are we processing the energetic experiences of our day, right? And that to me relates to emotional metabolism. And when we look at energetic metabolism and emotional metabolism, to understand these things, there needs to be somewhat of a foundation of emotional intelligence and energetic intelligence. And for us to have intelligence and wisdom on this, we need to have an awareness of it. And for us to have an awareness of it, we need to shift our perspective inward, get quiet enough, and observe over time, over seasons, over experiences. And so, emotional and energetic intelligence of our emotional, energetic metabolism comes from our ability to be consciously aware of these states and these perspectives. And these happen in the inner world, they happen on the inner landscape. And it's a whole other level. If you imagine yourself like in a high rise building, this is another floor. This is a different floor. You can see things from this floor. And this is largely guided by your own intuition and your own language around your intuition, because your intuition, your energetic intelligence, your emotional intelligence, this is all an internal awareness. And to develop this, it's almost like you have to recognize there's something going on that there is a pattern of, and you have to almost build the bridge to that level of consciousness and awareness. And then you have to walk that bridge. And you have to remember the whole time that each person has to build their own bridge and walk that bridge. And it's going to look differently. And people can help you by saying, this is what it felt like when I crossed that bridge, when I built that bridge. Some people will say, I didn't even need a bridge. I just absorbed myself in the experience. And that's wonderful too. Whatever visuals you need, whatever visuals relate for you, are the visuals that are going to help you connect up and create interface with that level of awareness and experience. And we need to be aware of the fact that in the beginning, when we're building a language around it, we're going to look at it differently the more time, the more immersion, the more awareness we get within that experience. Just like when you start a new course and you're starting a new academic adventure, whatever, you get into this course and you go to the first day and you sort of get a broad perspective on what's this course going to be about. By the time you get halfway through that course, by the time you get to midterms, you have a totally different perspective. It's not that the initial perspective didn't inform you of what was going to be there. It's just your depth and understanding and comfortability and like, oh, okay, now that I see it from this vantage point, I understand it a little bit better. It's like surveying the same thing from 100 different angles. You get a way better perspective than when you just look at it from one side or you just take one perspective on it. So developing this emotional intelligence, this energetic intelligence, this language of intuition is the next leap. And I think it's absolutely necessary. I think it's the next necessary sense we need to develop as human beings to be able to function in our fast paced, fast evolving technological world. We're being ushered into this level of awareness. It's funny, I was having a conversation with someone today on social media about their page and about, bots sort of copying their page and taking their stuff. And I was like, we are in the era of having to be very discerning about bots, scams, like different things that are now in surplus because of the age of information. So we are now flooded with so much information. We're also flooded with so much option. We are now becoming very aware of the level of superabundance, the level of information, option around us. We are now coming to see there's so many perspectives, and our only way through is to become very aware of our own subjective experience and also remember that we're relating to one another on a grander scale. So our subjective experience, our inner world, we must navigate, and we must navigate how things make us feel to know if they're right for us, because we're going to have 100 different people tell us 100 different things and why this is truth and why that is truth and why their truth is the truth. And ultimately, we need to navigate our inner world and get a really good instinct for what is for us and what is not for us in any given moment, because something might be very healthy, but you might have a contraindication for that. And the only way you're going to know these things is if you're acutely aware of how they make you feel, if you're connected up to your intuition. I mean, you could have experiences where you go ahead and try something and then you realize that did not work for me. And that's wonderful. That's another way of gathering intelligence. And I don't think that's going away either. But with the amount of information we're bombarded with, there needs to be an efficient way for the human being to synthesize their experience, to like unify, to metabolize their experience, to be intuitively led to what's for them when there are a million pathways laid out in front of them. So, from what I've experienced on my path, and I want to speak in metaphor and I want to speak in general sort of language, because my path is not your path. Your path is your path. But you will traverse the path and there will be signposts and there will be archetypal things that are relatable. And I want to provide comfort that you come through. I want to provide reassurance that you're able to handle your life and you're able to navigate your inner landscape and you're able to develop a language of intuition and you're able to connect with that aspect of yourself that has that higher vantage. Some people call it higher self, some people call it source, some people call it guide, some people call it inner spirit. Whatever you've decided to know this part of you as, there is a part of you that will give you, that gives you your gut instinct. When you can look back on those situations and you're like, I don't know how I knew this thing, but I just knew it. I knew to turn left at that moment. I knew to get in my car at that moment. I knew not to eat that thing in that moment. I knew, like that's always there for you. It's always available. It's just, we are so attuned to outsourcing our attention, our focus, our authority, our should I, shouldn't I, that we sometimes forget to connect up with this aspect and make it more robust, make it more loud, make it more influential for us. And this aspect of us speaks in metaphor, right? We are the receiver of this feeling, this intuition, this energetic impulse. We are the receiver, and we need to attune our receiver so that when we're receiving these impulses, these energy bites, these waves, that we know what they mean for us. And it's like, it's a meta level, right? That's why metaphor works. It's we talk in metaphor because it's not going to fit everybody the exact same way. And not only that, it'd be shortchanging you if somebody was digesting all your content for you and spitting it in your mouth. Like, you develop this sense by making the mental leaps, by making the intuitive leaps. That's how you strengthen this muscle. That's how you strengthen this capacity. No doubt you already have it. Everybody already does. And it comes in sometimes and saves your butt. But and I have a story. I have a few stories of actually where, like, I don't doubt this. I don't doubt it. I know what it is. I know how it feels. I've had enough experiences where I'm like, yep, that's what that is. It's been incredibly empowering. It's been life-saving in some aspects. It's there. And when I ask to be shown in meditation, I have had the most beautiful, overwhelming, emotional experiences of being shown how it's always been there. And it's pure love. There's no fear of like, I'm going into this corner of my mind and it's dark and it's scary. It's not that. It's not that. That could be fear that comes up to be processed. And that's why it's an interesting trip, learning your language of intuition, learning your internal landscape, because you're going to confront the parts of you or the residues of unprocessed emotions. And it might freak you out, but it doesn't mean that that's not, that you don't have a connection with your intuition. It just means there's some stuff there to process. And that's why it takes a great deal of self-trust. And it takes a great deal of trust in just benevolence in general. Like, you're not sent into this crazy wilderness where these, mind goblins are out to scare you and lead you astray. And so, metaphor helps us understand this journey, and it helps us know that we're going to create this robust connection. And here's the other thing, when it speaks in metaphor, it's taking this level of consciousness is taking whatever frame of reference you have. So I've heard so many channelers talk in metaphor, and it's interesting to hear each one talk in different metaphors. Like, I've heard channelers use like Pokemon references to talk about metamorphosis, to talk about ability, to talk about different things. And what's interesting is when you're getting intuitive hits, you still have your mind framework that it has to come through. So these intuitive hits have to use the framework that's already there, and they can sort of show you where there's a limit in your framework. But so if you understand computer programming, then you're going to receive intuitive hits. You're going to understand what's happening with you through that framework, probably, if that's the most easy way for you to understand the mechanics of how this is, how life is working, how things are working, how this is working out for you. If if your framework is poking, it will speak to you in the language that you already have and know, but it's a loose experience of that language. So you have to loosen up around it. So I've used this example so many times. Like, you might get the metaphor of a tree. How you see a tree, it's going to speak directly to you. It's like, when you were young and you had an imaginary friend, and the way you communicated was like a telepathic thing because it was imaginary, right? So it's like that feeling. It's like the feeling of when you had a best friend as a kid and you had your own little language for things, or you had your own little inside jokes, or certain things meant certain things to you, like certain places meant certain things to you, certain colors, certain ways of doing something, certain ways of speaking to one another, certain inside jokes, certain TV shows, like all of that sort of inside. What you're taking is a concept that could mean 100 different things. You're both simultaneously attaching a meaning to that thing. So in that moment, you can gain an understanding. You can be on the same wavelength for a moment to create a connection, to create an idea, to create understanding between one another. And that's basically what you're attempting to develop with your intuition, with your inner um, emotional intelligence, with your energetic language. So when we're trying to develop this energetic language, it's like how something feels, the quality of what it feels like. This energetic intelligence is like, how do you assess the energy coming in? How do you assess the energy going out? How does the energy feel as you're experiencing it? Like when you're experiencing someone in a conversation, how are you experiencing their energy? Many of us know this. Like if we step back and we're asked, like, how is that person overall? And if we're going to give an overall of a person, we're not going to like really hone in on one experience. We're going to sort of think, oh yeah, this person feels like blah 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 to me. Like pick someone you really love and it feels as though there's no investment in contriving something. You're more just like giving, what's this person feel to me? And then that example also shows you, like, you're going to have some preconceived notions. Like not everybody's going to feel that person's vibe the way you do. But if you ask 30 people, what's the common vibe that they all feel, knowing that you might have a different nuance. And that's great because you also need to understand the nuance you bring to things. So energetic intelligence and emotional intelligence means we also have to have the level of conscious awareness of what we are predispositioned to think. And shoot, like when we're going through transformation and transmutation and things are changing, we also need to account for, well, I don't want to hem myself into this level of thinking. So, I'm always changing. What's the most expanded way of thinking about this? How can you're right, it becomes very slippery. And that's the way energy and intuition is, and emotions are. They're not static, they're not stagnant, they're flowing. It's like trying to hold water in your hand and describe the quality of it. We have to be malleable, we have to be open, and we have to trust that what's coming through is what's what we're meant to see, and then also discern, okay, given what I know about myself, my ego, my personality, my belief systems, my triggers, how I feel about certain things, knowing what lens I often put on certain things. So we have to know our lens, and we have to know the vibe of what we're feeling, and we have to be aware of which is which. So with emotional intelligence, this is like mood, this is emotions, this is the feeling, this is how the body feels, this is the somatic experience, the somatic receiving of something. Like, what does the energy feel like? What does the emotion feel like? And then in terms of energy, like, what's the speed? What's the pace? What's the flavor? What's the taste? What's the vibe? It becomes, you have to let go of trying to nail something in a static form, and you have to be open to say, well, in this light it looks like this, and from this perspective it looks like this. And it's a feel, it's not a, it is. It's a feel. It feels like this. It feels warm. It feels inviting. It feels comforting. It feels like home. It feels cold. It feels rough. It feels fast. It feels draining. It feels, so you have to start opening yourself up to that level of understanding and thinking and talking. And so moving from like, how does that look like? How do we get that? Like for me, meditation has been huge. Showers of all places, that's where I usually get the most. And it's funny because like that's a flowing, watery place. And of course, it loosens me up to feeling these flowy, watery sensations. That's energy and emotion. They're waves, they're not static structures. So when we can get in that sort of wavy feel, we loosen up and our interpretation becomes a little more easier to sit with and feel into. And so meditation, showers, walks, breath work, anytime we're moving things, right? When I'm moving my body and my mind can just relax, that's when things come to me. When I'm doing breath work and I'm moving the breath through my body, that's when things come to me. So it's like this language that we have to develop. We have to know what it means, and we have to also know what our preconceptions are. And this is like a muscle that we grow. It's a skill we all get to have. It's a sense. It's like the sixth sense. It's the sense that we get to have, this clairvoyance, this claircognizance, this clairaudience, like all of the telepathy. These things are mental leaps. This is a leap that we have to develop on our own. And if somebody were to feed us this and spoon feed us this, it would be dogmatic and it wouldn't be our intuition. That's why, when some people are, how do you trust it? It's just on the inside of your head, like in your inner mind. It's just in your head. It's not real. The inner world is very, very real. And it's the place that people can't tell you what you're thinking and feeling. It's your place. It's your realm. And you have to make the leaps to get there. And you have to have the inner integrity and the inner ability to walk your fine line and know when you're adding something, know when your ego's coming in, knowing all of your aspects, right? You have to be able to know all your aspects and feel what they feel like. So you have to know your ego. You have to know what that feels like when your ego's speaking. You have to know your moods. You have to know what your moods feel like when they take hold of you, because that could be tainting your perspective in the moment. You have to know how your body's feeling. You have to know when you're fatigued, what that feels like and how that affects your interpretation of the situation and scenario. You have to know when certain people trigger you or when people have triggered something from your past. Like, you have to intimately know yourself and have an awareness. Your awareness has to become bigger than being within your personal identity. You have to become bigger. You have to come outside of your programmed ideologies and have a perspective beyond that to be able to see. And then you start to realize like how many opportunities there are reflecting back to you where you're at, your dream state reflecting back to you where you're at. And then, oh my goodness, it's like learning a new language everywhere, but not really, because once you learn the language of your intuition, you start to decipher these ciphers. You start to decipher these codes, these experiences, right? And I want to say, like, women get a lesson in this early with menstruation. And we get to learn this mood feeling and this anticipation and this preamble and this like coming to an awareness of something that's coming down the line, because we anticipate the cycle and we know how it feels when the cycle comes on. And we get this practice so good. We get so good at this practice. We get so good at this intuitive quality of this experience because there's pattern recognition and validation that is happening so frequently. It's happening monthly, usually. I mean, some people's cycles are different. Either way, my point is we're getting it so frequently so that we can see and be validated in our, oh, okay, about the 2 days before I feel this, about 3 days before I feel this, about 4 days in I feel this. During ovulation, I feel this. So we are fortunate enough to have this cycle where we really get to learn the inner landscape and moods and emotions and feelings in a cyclical way. So we get that validation, that feedback, and we really come to know ourselves. We get the practice very frequently. And we get to understand that the inner work is cyclical, seasonal, right? We get to understand, like some people even talk about menstruation to the level of like when your flow is heavier, how did you feel that month between the two, between your cycle, like overall your whole cycle, between lunar cycles even. I My cycles line up with full moons, so sometimes they line up with new moons as well. They shift, I think almost quarterly when I look at it. But understanding that sometimes when I have a particularly heavy menstrual cycle, I've experienced particularly heavy emotions, and there was more purging, and there was more releasing, and there was more emotional um, metabolizing happening. And so when I talk about this energetic and emotional metabolism, it's like, what's your recovery like? What's your resting heart rate? What's your stasis? What's your baseline? What's your, when you get back up to, how you perform? Like it's built on that cyclical understanding. What's your baseline? What's your stasis? What's your resting, energetic rate? What does it feel like to recover? What's your process for recovery? I heard somebody talk about this. Like they said, I can take certain lessons standing up, and some of those lessons used to take me out. And I feel that so deeply. There are some things that used to take me out, like take me to bed. I'd be in bed for 2 to 3 days dealing with certain things. And it's been so incredible to see my work, the great work I've been doing, my inner work, and how certain things I metabolize, not because I'm trying to bypass and not because I'm trying to force and not because I'm not trying to accept myself, but in the process of accepting myself, loving myself, bringing gentle awareness, um, dissolving the things that don't serve me and don't add to my quality of life. Through that process, I've been able to recover my integration time. My metabolism has kicked in certain things I take standing up that used to knock me down. Certain things I used to have to take in the fetal position, I now take on the fly. Some things I take while running. Some things I'm like, I go through a situation, I'm like, wow, oh my God, that didn't even trip my wires. And actually, if I think about it, a year or two ago, that would have had me having to wrestle with some demons or having to wrestle with some frustration, having to really sit with myself, breathe through it. Like, oh my goodness, parenting is such a crash course in this. I feel so privileged to be able to have children. And at the same time, I acknowledge that this is sometimes it can feel like a marathon. And like I've sat in quiet contemplation after being so frustrated and feel the tears stream down my face and go from feeling like, how is this, feels like Groundhog Day and I cannot stand this situation. I cannot stand the pattern that it brings up in me, to I'm so grateful for this experience. I'm grateful for the triggers, to I'm just grateful to have the people in my life I have. I'm grateful to have my kids. I'm grateful to have this life and to be able to move through that cycle and feel literally satisfied in that cycle and feel recovered from it, and then feel like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to go again. Like I'm ready for the next thing. I'm tip top shape. I could go on a stage and speak right now. Feels like such a reward. So that's what I mean by emotional metabolism and energetic metabolism, like the things that come up. How long does it take us to recover? And not to rush us through the recovery process, but to recognize a pattern, because we do have the ability to work with that. We do have the ability to um, metabolize quicker. We have the ability to really get ourselves in a high performing state, and not high performing as in hustle and grind, but to know that we can alchemize things just like nature. We can break things down and we can turn it into energy and fuel. And we can use our intuition to help us navigate through this process. So part of that is, again, knowing our inner world, knowing ourselves in and out, knowing our higher self, right? And knowing that we're creating the bridge to this experience in these inner planes, and that we can trust ourselves, right? And being really aware that our experiences are part, the seeds we plant, and the soil the seeds grow in. So our intention is part of it. Our soil, the environment we've created, is part of it. Um, if we're having this emotional experience, how have we set ourselves up? How is our body working already? How are we supporting ourselves in all areas, like spiritual, emotional, physical, mental? Like how are those systems running, and are they running efficiently? Can they be running more efficiently? Can we self support? And again, understanding the language, understanding the intelligence of it, understanding how things feel for us. And so this seeds and soil experience for me is like the intention and the environment and the combination that makes. And really understanding, like, sometimes it takes time to see what our intuition is telling us. Sometimes our knee jerk would be like, oh, that's wrong, that's not for me, that's not good, oh, that's not going to be good, oh, this doesn't feel good. And sometimes when we sit with it, we find, oh my God, this is like, we think it's just the outside, this plastic heart, and we open it up as if it's a Polly Pocket. It's a whole town. It's a whole experience. It's like a caboodle. Or for some of you listening, it's like a fishing tackle box. It opens up and there are more and more compartments and there is more information to be had. And the more we can relax and flow and understand the language of our intuition, the more we open up to the messaging that is there for us. Like, there are things that I thought were just, one shot experiences. The more I do this work, the more I realize nothing is a one shot experience. Like, you get to squeeze the juice out of everything. And when you think there's no more juice, there's still juice. And I thought this was showing me one thing. And then I realized, oh my God, there's 10 more messages. Like, even last night, I had a dream that was like a little bit, there was fear in the dream. And I didn't like it at first. And I was like, oh, why am I having this fear-based dream that bothers me? What else, what other work can I do? Because I'm very motivated to do the inner work, right? And then sitting in meditation, I was shown several reasons as to why this dream, what it was showing me, why the fear feeling was there, what the fear feeling was actually giving me. It, instead of it feeling like, God, ugh, what is this? like a blindside punch, it felt like somebody was handing me this little piece of code that when I opened it up, it was actually a holograph and it had several meanings and the layers were rich. And that's why the practice of connecting and having this language and having this trust means that you get more out of the experience. But also, I mean, don't drive yourself crazy with it, because I've been there too, where I'm like, what's the meaning? Look at all the layers and levels of meaning. And it's almost like that thing where if you try to pry it, it's only going to cause you strife. So striving to pry it open, you're required to balance yourself to be able to get the lessons, to speak to higher self, to reveal the meaning. It's not coming from a contracted state. It's not coming from a contracted mind. Remember, energy and emotion, they flow. The moment you clamp up and close around them, or try and strive, or try and force, you're not getting the full benefit. You're not getting the full bodied experience that you could be getting. And it's not as a punishment. It's just literally, you need to relax and open up. You need to expand to have that awareness. So if expansion means you're like spreading arms wide and deep breath in your lungs and you're really taking up space, contracting around something would be so contracted that you can't see. You're in a tight ball. You're not able to see, beyond that perspective. And so when we start to feel things coming up, we look at the seeds in the soil. So, what was the intention for this? And then, what's the environment that the intention was seeded within? And that combination is creating our experience. And knowing the seed and the environment, knowing your intentions and how you respond, these are all key to understanding emotional intelligence, to understanding energetic intelligence, to understanding your emotional and energetic metabolism as well. You know your cycles and seasons. You know how you do it best. Some people talk about, self-care, for instance, and some of us will do self-care that somebody has mentioned or suggested, and we're like, why is this self-care not working for me? Why does it feel like these hot baths aren't doing anything for me. And part of it is the intention. Like, I'm taking the bath to get this over with. Okay, well, that might be a contracted feeling or state, right? Some of it might be, the way we're doing the bath. We need something different. It might be, I respond actually better to showers, or I respond to running, or I respond to walking, or I respond to breath work with my eyes closed. Like, it's going to be different for all of us. How we achieve these states is different, but really examine your intention. Is your intention to get it over with? Like, I've spoken to people who understand the idea of inner child work, right? Looking at our past, looking at our programs, looking at our hurts, looking at our wounds, looking where we're carrying maybe an acidic environment based on trauma. And they're realizing that's something that needs to be healed. So they're very motivated to heal it. And they're very like, oh, when am I going to be done with this inner child stuff? What is, and I will say the intention of when am I going to be done with it is not the open sesame command. It's great that we've come to the table to look at it, but open sesame like does not come from like a pry bar and an irritation and a you get the hell out. I want to see you. I want to talk to you. And if anything, what's beautiful is like that showing us where we're at. Okay, so I'm at the stage of like, when is the inner child work done? When am I done healing? I'm annoyed with healing. What does that show us about our patience towards our own process? What does that show us about our openness to the journey? Are we supple? Are we flowing? Are we inviting of the process? What's our intention? Because if our intention is just to fix it right now, that's not the same as our intention to integrate and enjoy the process and actually claim our rights to this process. Like, think about the things we want to outsource as well. If we ask yourself, like, if I could just outsource this journey, this partnering with my inner child, with my higher self, with my inner landscape, with my intuitive land, if I could just outsource this for a designer to come in and do all the digging up and make all this new and make it pretty, and then I just arrive and I go back in, would you even know the language? Like, this is a earned relationship. It's not something like, at a certain point you realize it's an honor and a privilege to reclaim yourself. It's your right to reclaim yourself. It's an honor, it's a privilege, it's a right, it's a devotion, it's a rite of passage that you wouldn't want to hand over to someone else. That's like asking someone to live your life for you. That's like, asking do it. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. You do it. And again, like I've been in that place where I've contemplated that too, in moments in my life. Like, I'd rather not do this. I'd rather have somebody else do that. I'm not talking for all things. Like, obviously outsource stuff. In the external world, outsource stuff. Get help if you want and need help and if you need assistance. But your sovereignty is yours to claim. And to give that to another individual, just, it doesn't make sense at a certain level. When you look back at in hindsight, you're like, oh, that could never be that way. That could never be that way. So learning this language, getting to know yourself, getting to experience this connection is like falling in love. And you don't want to miss that. You don't want to miss that. You want to have that. You want to have the rewards of it. You want to have the relationship with it. And you get to understand those aspects of your intention and your environment. You get to understand how the combinations come together. And from there, you get to start creating more intentionally. From there, that awareness level means that any time that something comes up, you're able to handle it. You're able to deep breath, make yourself big, expand yourself. And this is a practice that I've been doing in meditation, where I literally visualize like myself etherically filling with air, filling, becoming big, spread out, make it etheric, make it thin, spread it out, make it big. And then imagine these challenges, problems, feel what they feel like in your body. Because there's always a feeling when we have a challenge, problem, whatever, there's always a feeling we can associate with it. We can ask ourselves, how does this feel? where am I feeling it? Where am I feeling this? And I imagine them like, and I give it a color, make it a ball, give it a color. Imagine this ball and imagine it like the size of a quarter compared to your size, and look at it from that perspective. And then it seems easier to see what the challenge is. It seems easier to feel the challenge. It seems easier to dissolve the challenge. I've literally felt pain in my body and just brought awareness to it and love and like really breathing into it and just breaking it up slowly, breaking it up with my awareness, breaking it up with the warmth of my awareness, breaking it up with the warmth of my appreciation and love. And I've felt the pain dissipate. I'm not saying this is going to work for everybody. I'm not saying this always, but I've found my ways that I've been intuitively guided to energetically alchemizing and metabolizing what feels like chunks of pain, what feels like chunks of stuck emotion, what feels like chunks of stagnant emotion. That to me, that's how I learned the somatic work. I worked with a somatic therapist. We walked through some things and I had to find my own way of feeling it. People can walk you through things, but they can only walk you there. It's like having a walkie-talkie and somebody being in but you're in the house. You got to walk around the rooms of the house and you got to find the thing, but you have somebody, in the van with the walkie-talkie and maybe they have a camera and they can see, but maybe they can't. And they got to walk you through it. They got to walk you through, okay, then go in this room and find this and it might feel like this. What do you feel? I've done like hypnosis sessions, like BQH, so a little bit lighter form of hypnosis, but with sessions with people where we've located a pain, like we've located a feeling in the womb, and it just has to work for you. And I'm not, this is not medical advice, and I'm not saying this works for everybody, but I've had experiences where people have literally felt something, found it, sat with it, melted it. We've decided it's coming out. They've made the decision energetically and etherically. This thing is coming out. It's moving. It's metabolizing through. We're moving it through. And they've experienced relief and release and like the tears and the letting go based on that. So you can work on your emotional metabolism. You can work on your energetic metabolism. You can work on how you process things through, but that's something that is so intimate to you. And I hope I've given you some ideas and some hints at what it could feel like. But ultimately, you have to set this up. You have to set this up for yourself. You have to set this language up. And it might feel delusional or it might feel like, what is this? But it doesn't necessarily matter, because in the realm of energetics, you're the one sensing it. It's your receiver. It's your radio receiver that's taking in the information. You get to calibrate that thing how you want. You get to work with that thing how you want. It's within your realm. This is in your right to evolve this perspective. You get to evolve this perspective for yourself. You get to have this level of purview. You get to inhabit this floor of your high rise. But you have to build it, and you have to energetically walk it, and you have to get energetically familiar with it. And you have to learn the language to communicate with it. And you have to learn the metaphor and the imagery that comes along with it. And this is like another example. When my husband's family sees cardinals, for them, that's connecting with their past loved one. Nobody can tell them different. That's how they feel. And that's the connection for them. I've listened to so many psychics talk about how their families sort of determine, well, what's going to be our signal when you pass? How will I know you're here? We can all likely relate on that level. It's the same arena. That's the same level. It just gets more nuanced. I've got like goosebumps talking about it now. It gets more nuanced the more time you spend with it. It gets more robust. You get more connected to it. Like, I want to say, I've had experiences that go beyond this world, that go beyond this human experience, that I know in my bones and my body. I've had experiences of direct connection to source, that there is nothing in this world that could change my perspective on it, because it is truth, and it is a note rung inside that human could not duplicate it. It is not, and it's not explainable, and it can never be taken away from me. It is so, the knowing is beyond. There's not even an experience. There's not even a language for me to tell you that. But I know some of you will hear that and be like, I know what that is. I've had that. I know what that is. I get that. I've had so many of those experiences that my trust and my faith, it's not even about trust. It's beyond trust and faith. It's like, it is. It just is. And so that for me has really helped in my developing of this intuitive experience, this intuitive inner world. And so, okay, the next episode I want to talk about this concept that I call the bleed through, and talk about creative visioning and creative visualization. I've been reading so much on it and I've been practicing for a long time, and arguably we've all been practicing it since we were kids, because it's our natural impulse to create through visualization, imagination. It is again another aspect of our divine human vehicle, our divine human experience, our divine human minds. Like, this is part of our divinity to be able to have this ability, and everybody has it. And we get jaded, we get pulled out of it, we get programmed out of it, we leave it because we've had some experiences that we've associated danger with it. However, we have come to disassociate from our creative imagination or dull it in our lives. We all have the ability, we all have the experience. And so that's going to be the next episode. I want to talk about that. And I call the bleed through, meaning like we get hints of what's coming down the line. We'll get etheric hints of what's happening. And part of my experience post sort of the deepest healing is like also looking at the themes of what's coming up next. I get more heads up. I get a heads up about what's coming. I get a heads up because this level of awareness that's beyond that, I can see where the ego's at. I can see this observer awareness level, this it's more of like an archetype level or architect level. So now I get to design a little bit more. I get to see from this blueprint level. I get to see from this level of like what's coming. How am I interacting with the environment? What's next? It feels like this, future visioning experience, this like clairvoyance. Having this awareness means that I can see what I'm working on, because I see the vantage point of all the interconnectedness. I see how my lessons are all connected. I see this is like the teacher student inner archetype relationship, where you get to get a preview of what's coming and you get a preview of what you're working on. You get the 40,000 foot level of like, oh, these are the themes coming up in my life right now. These are the things I'm working on. So that's what my next episode is that I'd like to talk about. Again, you can find me at Instagram at Femist, Femmyst. You can find me on TikTok. I'm working on posting more on TikTok, but we'll see. Hopefully getting some YouTube presence more and more. If this episode would benefit somebody you know by hearing, please do share. If you want to reach out and connect with me, you can find me on Instagram. That's probably the best place. Otherwise, I hope this has helped you feel into your intuition a little bit more. I love talking about this. I could talk about it for hours. I'll probably make more episodes on it. But for now, I hope this gets you started on connecting with your own. And if you need to connect with it deeper, who knows? Thank you very much for being here. Sending you lots of love.